The American Revolution was about freedom from tyranny. The counter-revolution of 1776 was about keeping slaves and stopping out the indigenous.
This meme is arguing that America's revolution in 1776 wasn't purely about freedom. It was also about protecting slavery and maintaining settler expansion westward at the expense of the indigenous people. Growing up, we're taught in schools that the Founding Fathers' revolution from the British was over freedom, liberty, and democracy, forming the country we live in today. But what if that narrative wasn't entirely true? The counter-revolution framing suggests that American Revolution was actually a fight to prevent the British Empire from limiting slavery and land theft. Over the last century, the theory has been promoted by many serious historians and scholars while also causing a meltdown from the traditionalist institutions. The counter-revolution theory has three core pillars. First was that slavery, the engine that built this country, was jeopardized. Before 1776, what we now know as America was not a country but a collection of British colonies that had forcefully taken the land from the natives. The entire foundation of these early colonies was slavery. People who looked like this weren't doing any manual labor. The operation started with the slaves in the South harvesting cash crops, in other words, creating the actual wealth, that would then be managed and shipped out of the northern ports, with all of the profits going to these guys. So it was business as usual until 1772, when back in Britain, a legal ruling called the Somerset Decision questioned the legality of slavery on British soil. Even though it had no effect on abolishing slavery in the colonies, it was enough to terrify the southern plantation owners and the northern merchants and bankers. Then, when the inevitable revolt between the colonies and Britain began in 1775, the royal governor of Virginia issued the Dunmore Proclamation, which offered freedom to all enslaved people who fled to the British side and fought against the colonists. These two acts, the Somerset Decision and the Dunmore Proclamation, were the 1-2 punch. The second pillar of the counter-revolution was the limiting of settler colonialism. The establishment of the British colonies was made possible by forcefully taking the land of the indigenous nations that existed there before they arrived. In many cases, the native people fought back because, to be colonized is a bad thing. This resulted in many bloody and expensive wars, for which the British eventually grew tired of being entangled in. In 1763, Britain finally drew a proclamation line that basically told the colonies no more expansion westward past the Appalachian Mountains. This royally pissed the colonists off, as many of them, including George Washington, had already inked massive lucrative land deals all throughout the West. And the final pillar was the colonists' fear of losing elite status. After all these policies enacted by the British government were perceived as to be empowering enslaved Africans and indigenous resistance, as well as angering the poor whites who were heavily taxed and restricted in ownership, the elites running the colonies were terrified that these three groups would join forces and destroy the racial and class hierarchy in which the entire system of power depended. Sounds so familiar. The eventual independence from Britain that the Founding Fathers would achieve protected slavery, reopened native lands to be seized, and reinforced the racial and class order that elites depend on to this very day.